A strange thing happened in modern life. You can work full-time, pay your bills, avoid obvious mistakes, and still feel like your future depends on forces you barely understand. A teacher checks her retirement app between classes and wonders why a red day on the market feels like a personal failure. A couple with solid incomes refreshes mortgage calculators at midnight because one move in interest rates can change the next 10 years of their lives. A graduate is told to build credit, manage debt, beat inflation, and start investing early, all before he has fully learned what any of those words mean. For most of history, ordinary people did not need to think like investors just to hold their ground. They needed income, family, community, and some measure of luck, but they were not expected to interpret bond yields, compare index funds, or worry that cash in the bank was quietly shrinking in real value. Today, that kind of thinking is treated as basic adulthood. If you do not understand mortgages, retirement accounts, insurance deductibles, student loans, tax shelters, and market cycles, you are told you are falling behind. The question is not why people feel anxious. The question is how normal life became so dependent on financial expertise in the first place. The older middle-class bargain was never as universal or fair as nostalgia pretends. It excluded many people by race, gender, geography, and class, and even in its strongest decades, it did not protect everyone. But it did carry a different expectation about what work was supposed to do. A decent job was more likely to come with a pension, wages that rose with productivity, and housing that had not yet become a national obsession, and a speculative ladder at the same time. College cost less relative to income, and many households could plan without feeling like one spreadsheet error would ruin them. That world did not require financial innocence, but it required less financial strategy. If your employer offered a defined benefit pension, retirement was tied more to years worked than to whether you picked the right mutual fund at age 26. If tuition was lower, education did not begin adult life with a debt instrument attached to it. If healthcare costs were less likely to wipe out savings, one illness did not automatically become a financial event as much as a medical one. The system still had risk, but more of that risk sat with institutions instead of landing directly on households. Then the structure changed. One of the biggest economic shifts of the last half-century was not only that inequality widened, but that uncertainty moved downward. Employers replaced pensions with 401k-style plans, which sounded modern and flexible, but also meant that workers now had to save enough, invest correctly, and retire at the right moment in the market. Governments pulled back from parts of higher education, and private debt rushed in to fill the gap. Healthcare grew more expensive and more administratively complex, so the average person had to think about premiums, deductibles, networks, and out-of-pocket maximums like a part-time claims analyst. Housing changed too, and the change ran deeper than high prices. A home became shelter, status marker, inflation hedge, forced savings plan, tax strategy, and leveraged bet all at once. Families were told that if they bought too late, they would miss the ladder, and if they bought too early, they might drown in the payment. The monthly cost of a house started depending not just on local wages and construction, but on central bank decisions, bond markets, and investor demand. People who only wanted a place to live found themselves tracking 30-year mortgage rates like traders watching a screen. Credit spread through everything. Credit cards, auto loans, student loans, buy now, pay later plans, home equity lines, personal loans, and a credit score that follows you like a shadow. You are expected to borrow carefully in order to prove that you can be trusted to borrow more. One missed payment can raise your costs for years, while disciplined payment history becomes a kind of reputation system for adulthood. The result is that basic life choices now run through financial infrastructure long before most people have the experience to judge the risks clearly. This is the hidden part of the story. Society did not get rid of uncertainty. It reassigned uncertainty from large institutions to individuals, and then called that freedom. Retirement risk moved from employers to workers. Education risk moved from the public to students. Medical cost risk moved from pooled systems to families. Market risk moved into the center of ordinary life. And then ordinary people were told to be smarter, more disciplined, and more optimized if they wanted stability. That is why so many intelligent, responsible people feel perpetually behind. They are not failing a simple game. They are trying to manage a stack of interlocking financial exposures that previous generations did not face in the same way. A normal adult now has to think like an amateur asset manager. He has to decide how much cash to hold even though inflation eats cash, how much to invest even though markets can fall, whether to buy a house even though prices may be distorted, and how quickly to pay debt when interest rates and opportunity costs pull in opposite directions. Notice how unnatural this is. Your future may depend on stock market returns in companies you have never studied, on housing supply in cities you do not control, on tuition inflation set by institutions you cannot negotiate with, and on monetary policy made by people you will never meet. Yet if these forces go badly for you, the culture often frames the outcome as a personal weakness. You should have started earlier. You should have known better. You should have optimized harder. It is a brutal message because it takes systemic complexity and turns it into private shame. Who benefits from this arrangement is not a mystery. Financial firms collect fees for managing retirement accounts that workers were once not required to manage themselves. Lenders profit when education, housing, cars, and emergencies are financed through debt. Employers offload long-term obligations. Asset owners gain when policy and culture push everyone toward markets as the only reliable path to preserve purchasing power. If wages alone no longer secure a stable life, then access to appreciating assets becomes the dividing line, and the people who already own those assets start the race far ahead. None of this means individuals are powerless, and it does not mean personal financial skill is useless. It means the stress feels personal because the system was built to deliver structural pressure through individual decisions. That is why smart people can read books, listen to podcasts, automate their savings, and still feel one rate hike, one layoff, or one medical bill away from disorder. The answer is not self-blame. The answer is seeing clearly that modern adulthood was quietly redesigned so that survival itself requires a level of financial fluency that culture, school, and work never seriously taught. Once you see that, the confusion starts to make sense.